Hello and welcome to this first live panel discussion for the Rebecoming the One free symposium that is focusing on the healing of our world through the healing of our relationships to gender and sexuality. And this symposium, if you're watching this and you haven't been part of the symposium, then hang on one second. Okay, so so today there are going to be 4 live panels. This first one is on the divine feminine. Then in an hour and a half is going to be one on the divine masculine. Then at 2 p.m. Pacific will be one called Returning to Wholeness. And then at 3:30 p.m. Pacific will be one called Transmuting the Shadow. So before we start, I just want to really briefly name who is on this panel, all these amazing, beautiful humans. And those of you on the panel are welcome to stay unmuted or mute yourself, whatever is comfortable for you. So we have Kathleen, Joan, Vanessa, Nixon, Erik, Roth, Michelle, Dench, Abigail, Mensah-Bonsu, Sheridan, Semple, Verena, Borell, and I'm Martha Hines. And so the way that I wanted to start is that all of you on this panel can be considered, experts in some form or another regarding the divine feminine and lots of other things, which is wonderful, which is why you're here. And at the same time, what I'm really wanting to drop in is to ourselves as beings of the divine, beings of our souls and our hearts. And so I want to take a minute to drop into prayer and silence, just really briefly, to connect ourselves to that part, that place of our wisdom, as opposed to trying to be, intellectual talking heads, which is also great and fine. But so I'm going to drop into that space in myself, and I'll say a couple of things from that place, and then we'll go from there. Yeah, so today in my prayers, I pray every day and I go into the light, and anyway, I get shown various things, and I ask every day, what is mine to do? And the reminder I got today was, today is solstice, right? So all of a sudden I totally forgot that today was solstice, even though I planned to end the symposium on solstice because I was told very clearly that was what needed to happen. So when I went into my prayers, I remembered, oh, wow, it is solstice. And the message I had was, remember the sun. So I dropped into that space, and what I felt was, of course, the sun above us, the earth below us, and us in between. And it was an instant remembering that we're not doing this alone, that we're here on the planet doing all the things we're doing, including being part of this panel today, and sharing whatever wisdom is meant to come through us, because we are in co-creation with the earth, and we are in co-creation with the sun and all the planets and all of existence, and with each other. And we're not doing it alone. We're actual agents of these forces that are us and are so much more than us. So as we're speaking today, it's like the sun talking through us. It's like the earth talking through us. It's a remembering of all of who we are. So I just invite you to come from whatever arises for you naturally. Just, it's all perfect and beautiful. And let's just take 30 seconds to drop into that knowing. And everyone listening, everyone participating in the future, I would invite us each to feel into the question of, what is the divine feminine? What comes to your heart? What comes to your mind? What comes to your body? What comes to your soul and your spirit? When you think about this question that matters quite deeply to many of us. What is the divine feminine? And those of you listening, feel free to comment, put things in the chat, or I realistically probably won't be able to read them now live, but I will later. And, you know, if you're watching on YouTube, please, or Facebook, definitely, please comment there also. I will read every single one of the comments, probably not right this second, but I would love to see your responses as well. So I'm just going to go around the circle on my screen, and if you each want to just say what came to you, I think we'll start there. As brief, you know, just a brief, what is the divine feminine? Vanessa, do you want to start?
Sure, thank you. Well, what came to me was that for me, the divine feminine is that part of me, that energy in me as a human being that is like a softly flowing brook or stream that flows through life, and whatever obstacles are there just allows itself to flow around them, um, not trying to push the obstacle away, but just flowing along with whatever life brings. That part of me that is just allowing and receiving what is, and um, and also that part that is nurturing, you know, the waters of life, that, you know, going back to that a metaphor of the stream, the nurturing waters of life. That was just the symbol that came to me as I was thinking about what the divine feminine means to me.
Beautiful, thank you. Erik.
Honestly, I have trouble doing any kind of visioning when I'm on Zoom. There's just I guess the electronic interface. But I always think of the divine feminine as something that we're here on this planet as the planet itself, as Gaia herself, in that way that also contains the masculine within. And so when I think of that, when I connect into that to me is that divine feminine in my life.
Thank you. Michelle.
Thank you, Martha. I was thinking, like, I can't consider myself an expert necessarily on the divine feminine. Rather, I'm an explorer trying to remember what that pure essence is, and let go of the conditioning that would cause me to believe it's something other than what it is. And when I connect with that energy, the divine feminine is a deep element of the divine mother, which we all come from. There's a universal quality that, regardless of gender, what's assigned at birth, or what we feel on the inside, we each come from this mother. We each live on the mother. And I'm personally, in the last few weeks of a journey of pregnancy, about to welcome another being whose gender would be assigned feminine at birth. And I feel present to that. There's something inherently ancient about the divine feminine, and deeply misunderstood. And that a part of my path is to come to understand both myself and the world, and heal that relative to everything that life is, that we all are part of this divine feminine.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yes. There's so much in there I would like to come back to if we have time, but yes.
Absolutely.
Abigail.
The divine feminine, for me, how she's coming up right now is the union between the elements of earth and water, and how they play together. Like the divine feminine is, I love what Michelle said, that aspect that we can't quite put words to. It's expansive, it's ancient, deep wisdom, and when you really tune into the energy of the divine feminine, like even put in a her, like that her to it doesn't even do it justice. It's so much more to the divine feminine that wants to open within us. And we have to let go of the labels to really tap into that true essence of what it means to be divine feminine embodied, because we're just expressions of her in union with the divine masculine. That connection, there's something there. It's like you can't see one without the other. You kind of see them together. The energies merge, and that is where we can really tap into that deeper essence, the deeper truth of who this energy, this being, this ancient being really is.
Yeah. Love it. Verena.
I love what you all said, and I consider myself as an explorer of the feminine as well, Michelle. Yeah, but yeah, what image or what feeling came into mind while we meditated together is that the divine feminine is Mother Earth, so matter, which comes from the Latin word mater, mother, and I got this image of the deep dark soil which receives the seed and births new life. So for me, it is really an energy that goes in and down, and it is a receiving energy without being passive. So it births new life, it creates, but from a state of sacred rest in a way, and it feels really, really ancient, and I really connected with the planet Earth too. So the ground, which gives us the safe space to lift into the sky, into the cosmos, but with this feeling of safety and security and a deep, deep connection to nature and to our body and to the incarnation, carnas, Latin for flesh, the incarnation of our soul, in this life on planet Earth.
Thank you. Beautiful. Sheridan.
So as we were dropping in, what came to me, which I was not expecting, was badassery. I was like, oh, okay. And just feeling like how badass the divine feminine is, because we've been so like denying it for such a long time, yet it's still so powerful and present, and how much even now we're like awakening to it and we're still denying it, where like we go, oh, the dark is bad. Well, isn't the dark the feminine, right? The yin, and as we're learning and we're trying to figure it out, and as I thought about this before we met today, I was thinking so much about how it is like the yin and the yang, right? You can't separate them out, just like Abigail was saying. I totally resonated with that, right? How it's like a part of the whole, in varying degrees, right? Of when we have the yang and we go to like the very tip of the yang symbol, it's to the maximum of the yin. And then it's like pouring cream into coffee, right? Where it's just all like swirled and it doesn't become homogenized the way that coffee ultimately will be, but that it's like always constantly flowing into and out of the other one. So the feminine for me, which, you know, feeling into like solstice, and the sun just moved into Cancer, which can be such a feminine sign. And, you know, my Mars and Venus like bookend my sun in Cancer, right? All together conjunct, you know? And so I was like, oh yeah, of course, I'm going to see the, you know, the sun in the masculine and feminine, the brain, the whole, but it's like that reception, the allowing, trusting, soothing, non-judgment, the darkness, downward, inward, cyclical, you know, introversion. Like these are words that came to me around the divine feminine. But when we dropped in, it was definitely badassery. So that hadn't come to me before your guided meditation. So thank you, because oh my gosh, man, we all honor the divine feminine.
Mhm. Thank you. Kathleen.
Wow, I'm just soaking in what everyone has said. This is all so amazing. What came to me in the meditation was sun energy. And as everyone, I love that everyone was talking about like water element and earth element and all of these beautiful like dark aspects of the divine feminine. And what I was getting during the meditation was this really bright, almost like heart chakra centered, like creative solar kind of goddess coming through. I don't know, maybe because I'm a priestess of Bridget, who is she's the ancient Celtic goddess of the sun and of fire. And so I was just like soaking in the solstice, you know, and I love holding that together with the water energy, with sun moving into Cancer, right, with the earth and everything that everyone has said about divine feminine. But yeah, I'll just bring in, you know, Bridget and her triple aspect was goddess of the forge, like a blacksmith's forge, which is our creative energy. So what some of you said about like that creative birthing potential of the divine feminine, right? Also the hearth, which is about nourishing and nurturing, and also of the temple, so like our spiritual devotion. So that's just what came for me. I love badassery. I like, yeah, just the fiery sun energy in conjunction with all of this that everyone has said.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. And I want to just throw out that so Vivian Monroe, who did one of the talks in the symposium, did her talk on the dark feminine, and I highly recommend that to everybody. It'll go very well with what you're saying, Sheridan. And of course, Sheridan, you talked about the dark aspect of the feminine in your talk also. I feel like there was one other thing I was about to say. Oh, Ada Pembroke also in her talk really flipped our conceptions of gender with regard to various planets. And yeah, highly recommend that. And there's an alarm next to my window. Okay. But yes, I love everything you said. So I'll ask my next question and then mute myself. I would love to hear from any of you who feel called to speak to this. What do you feel like our world needs right now with regard to the divine feminine? Like what are the needs of the divine feminine, or some version of where are we in the world with regard to our relationship to the divine feminine? Does that make sense? Okay, so just anyone go. I'm going to mute myself until this stops.
Well, I'll just like jump in then. I think that for me, how I would answer this, obviously for me is, I think the most important thing that we can do right now as a collective around the divine feminine is like turn towards and embrace the darkness, right? Stop making it be about going to the light, right? You know, I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm saying if we're solely focusing on that, then we're just denying the feminine, right? That's the place of we're creating more polarity, you know, and and nowadays it seems like we're more and more starting to understand the value of the underworld or the darkness. And so we'll kind of like begrudgingly go there, or we know it's an important step to then like get back to the rebirth and the light, you know? And it's like, I think every time we do that and we make the darkness bad, then we're reinforcing the yin is bad, the feminine is bad, right? That's the negative in the bad aspect of things. And I think none of us want to do that, right? No, we wouldn't go around and anyone would go, feminine, not so sure about that, right? Like we're all proponents of the feminine, but I feel like when we make the dark bad, or there be bad forces that are doing bad things to us, all of that, that it just becomes this place that we just keep propping up unconsciously, the patriarchy. Yeah, so that's what I feel is the most important piece from my perspective.
Who else?
I love this. What is coming through, what is needed now is for each and every one of us to really go within ourselves and understand who the divine feminine is within us. Because I'm saying she, but what is coming through is that I am you. So what does that mean? I am you. You know, all of us were different emanations of this divine feminine essence. And it's not, we need to stop seeing this energy as something up here outside of us that we need to grow into, step into, become. Because all I keep hearing is that I am you. Get to know who I am within yourself. You know, one of the things that I teach is taking you within yourself to meet your divine feminine and divine masculine. So you can get to know this aspect of yourself, and then you can show up as that. And then whoever comes into your energy receives that invitation to also show up as that. And eventually, if we're all showing up in that fullness, we can put the puzzle pieces together and see the bigger picture of who the divine feminine really is. It's not something outside of us. It's within us. We are the divine feminine, just as we are the divine masculine.
What came into my mind is deconditioning from all of these expectations, how we should be, live, love, and really coming back to what is natural for us. So I think that everything comes out of balance when we try to live in a way that is not natural for us, that we try to fit into certain rules, how we have to behave as a woman or as a man or as fill in the gaps. And I think that the divine feminine as well as the divine masculine, they are all of these energies and everything what is in between and what it even means, divine feminine, divine masculine, is everywhere. And I think when we tune into ourselves and really live more from live in a more authentic way, then we automatically neither repress the feminine nor the masculine within us, but we can actually let them breathe together and let them create and dance together. And when we maybe detach in a good way from our own concept, what it means to have a vagina or a penis or something else, but really allow ourselves to live just what is natural for our soul, I think then the balance or the dance, which is always dynamic, can be reestablished. And I think the first step is, looking into the darkness and don't put it all away, and decondition and becoming aware of our own education, conditionings, belief systems, how we judge ourselves and judge others.
I love what everyone said so far about this. And what's coming up for me is that we are at a crucial point in human history with the climate crisis, as well as many other crises as we want to talk about, right? Like happening in the world. And the divine feminine, for me, is the one who invites us back into right relationship. A lot of us mentioned Mother Earth, right? And ourselves as embodiments of co-creators with Mother Earth. And part of our task as humans, I think, at this point with the climate crisis is to get back into a balanced relationship, like so many of us have been talking about, that balance, right? So a balance between humans and the earth, a balance between masculine and feminine, men and women in society, decolonializing our world, right? Getting rid of racism, getting rid of economic oppression, like all of these things involve that rebalancing. And so that's where I feel like is like we're at this point where the divine feminine is rising as part of that, right? Like she's been so kind of repressed under centuries of patriarchy that as we come back into balance, we need her to become more present, right? In order to really restore those right relationships. And of course, patriarchal religion has a lot to do with that. And a lot of my work is within transforming our ideas about God, the divine, right? So God is not just an old white man sitting up on a cloud, but like, what happens if God is she, if God is Mother Earth, if God is within us, right? And we're allowing that divine feminine to come back into balance. So that's all I'll say.
I would love to jump in. As an astrologer, I feel like part of what is always pointing my compass is where the sun, the moon, the stars are actually pointing us towards the direct path for healing. And in this particular time, the North Node and Venus are both in the sign of Taurus, which is an earth embodied feminine sign. And then we also have the sun, which has just entered the sign of Cancer, which is a womb water embodied sign. And there's an opportunity as we're following the natural cycles of our life, of our soul's evolution. There's an opportunity to then just become one with what is presenting itself, like the season, the rhythm, the cycles of the moon. These things are inherently feminine. They don't require any exertion for us to just simply begin to align our lives with their natural ways. In the same way that birth, the birth process is a natural process. And a part of the deconditioning that's happening in our culture right now relative to the feminine is removing the idea that there are things that have to be done, that birth is a medical condition, that that the things that we would create that would create separation and isolation are actually not natural to the feminine. And so when we're removing those aspects, whether it's within our own consciousness, through really having a direct relationship with the earth, with the water that's inside of us, the water that is on this planet, whether it's in relationship to the moon or to the cycles of our own life, when we begin to just follow something that's so inherently natural within us, that's where I find the personal healing and the exploration, whether it's past issues with your mother, or whether it's like a sense of rejecting the feminine inside entirely for fear that will be taken downstream by something that is so unknown to us. Like, I feel the feminine is often related to the unknown in the same way birth essentially is a portal where neither the mother nor anyone else can predict when your soul wants to incarnate, how that wants to be. And there's such fear that's often associated with that. And a part of the deep healing relative to the feminine is actually a releasing of that fear, a surrendering to the trust in the cycles that allows us to be one with where we are in the present moment. And that level of surrender brings a state of peace ultimately, that I think is inherent to the quality of the divine feminine. It's a strength of fierceness. I love the badassery, because there is a fierceness to that portal of life, of soul incarnation, that is required in order for all beings to have a place on this, in this material world.
Love it. Vanessa.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I love everything that everyone has said so far. I really totally resonate with all of it. And I just wanted to echo a few of the things that dropped in for me. And that is that, yes, this is work we each have to do within ourselves. And also not only for ourselves, but for the world. We have to start with ourselves. And the part about, deconditioning ourselves, that kind of brought up for me the fact that I didn't know anything about the divine feminine or masculine growing up, and becoming a woman. I didn't know what any of that meant. And so for me, a big part of, how to get back to that balance is not only getting back to that balance first within myself, but then in the ways that I can touch people in my world, and helping other people to find that within themselves. And that's part of the work that I do with women, in menopause, because so many women come to me and they have no idea they've been in this patriarchal world, and they're doing. And when they have, symptoms or health conditions during this transition, they just want to know what they can do, and again, as Michelle said, with our natural cycles becoming medicalized, they think, what is the medical procedure? What do I have to do? And so, just really helping people to reframe that this is a rebalancing of our energies. And sometimes it's not about doing, more so it's about being and allowing and receiving. And so that part dropped in. And also the other part that dropped in was, for me, I felt like part of the deconditioning of our society is around how we do raise our children, so that they don't end up, coming into the birth transition and the menopause transition, the first menarche transition, not understanding the natural rhythms of the feminine. And, that's another big part of my work is, whenever something comes up, going back to how does nature deal with this cycle? What are the cycles of nature, and how can we emulate that? How can we be part of the natural rhythms that are around us, the natural rhythms of Mother Earth and our own natural rhythms, and how all of that intersects.
And I just want to say, I mean, every single talk in the whole symposium is amazing. And so I'm not singling you out, but I'll just say that, I mean, recording your talk on menopause as a spiritual initiation was so transformative for me, being a 45-year-old person who I'm sure I'm in perimenopause, but I don't know it. Like I'm not consciously thinking about it yet. And there were just so many facts I didn't know. Like, what is the definition of menopause? Wow. How did I not know these things? But anyway, everybody needs to watch every single one of these talks, including yours. Yeah.
Martha, I don't know if you saw in the Q&A, there was one attendee who was requesting to hear Erik's perspective.
Oh yeah, no.
And there was also some question just around kind of expanding upon the light or dark shadows being associated with the feminine.
Perfect. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, Erik, do you want to say something?
Could you repeat the question that you asked when the car alarm was going off?
Mhm.
I couldn't really understand it, which was part of the reason I was delaying my response.
Okay, yes. Yeah, well, so you could take this question in a lot of different ways, but essentially, what do you feel like our world is needing at this moment with regard to the divine feminine, and or what is the divine feminine needing in this time in general?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All of your responses have been amazing. I resonate with all of them. And Kathleen was talking about in right relationship with the earth. And in my own experience and my own education and research and my personal feeling with on a heart level, I would fully, totally agree that in order for us to, one of the ways, in order for us to be in really can reconnect with the divine feminine and be part of it and within ourselves is to be truly in right relationship with Gaia, with the earth, and whatever pronouns we want to use for that particular being that is earth here that we live on. And we can see the correlation with the climate, what's happening with the climate, our stripping of the resources on this planet, the pollution. We could see that being completely out of balance, and that is a sign of also being completely out of balance with the feminine as well, and especially with the patriarchal energy and the masculine being out of balance with that. And it's as if it's a complete projection in part of the masculine, whatever unconscious feelings are coming through that are having unintended consequences on the planet and creating even greater chaos and a mess for humanity. And so to see that, so the poisoning of the planet itself in that way, that it's sort of the creating more greater and greater division. And the situation that we have on this planet is really challenging as an understatement there. But we can get back into that space. We can do more by being in right relations, by having a relationship with nature, by actually going out and connecting with the plants and the animals, the ocean, the air, and the earth itself. And that, in a way, is reconnecting with the feminine. And maybe through that process, each of us, and I talk about this in my talk for the symposium regarding the masculine. We can really touch into that space and get into greater balance there between that polarity, that duality that we live in, and everything in between that, because there's so much beauty in between all of that, and even outside of it, that we're kind of stuck in those corners. And certainly in my generation growing up, those were the defined, that was the defined polarity, but it expanded greatly. And now there's, of course, people that are stuck in that world still and not wanting to face their own fears, not wanting to change, adapt to the changing world and evolve. So, but I fully get into with protecting the earth, being stewards of the planet, really taking care, and as we did many thousands of years ago, and this is long before the patriarchal forces were here. We were truly in right relationship with the earth and the magic of that. And that's, in a sense, the great mother the feminine, both the light and the dark and everything between, that we harnessed it in a healthy way. We worked with it in a healthy way. We didn't ignore it. And something what Sheridan was talking about, we need to incorporate that very, very much to be in right relationship and not react as all the major religions, not all of them, but most of the major religions and a lot of other countries and governments, and we could just go on and on about that. But so here in the United States, it's been really profound seeing the division, but we know how to, I do feel we know how to get back to it, and I do believe we will. Anyway, that was what I wanted to share there. Thank you, Martha.
Yeah. I want to come back to the question about the light and the dark if we have a second, but I want to ask a question that this brings up for me that someone submitted ahead of today's panel. Tatsi, thank you. So Tatsi is asking, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but she's asking for people who identify as cisgender women, which I think a lot of you are. She's asking, what do you feel like our role is, or your role is, with regard to gender healing on this planet? Like, so, and I'm going to add, especially for Erik, if somebody identifies as a man, what is the most important thing that we could be doing at this moment? And for people who identify as non-binary and gender fluid and any gender identity, I guess the same question applies. But I don't know if you have a brief answer to that question, any of you, or if you want me to rephrase it.
Martha, I hear the question as like, what are the things that from a cisgendered perspective we can do to actively participate in sort of in healing this? Is that?
I think what the question is, and Tatsi, if you want to clarify in the chat, because I think you're here. My interpretation is, we think of gender issues being caused by men, or, perpetrated by men, that kind of a thing. So if we're going to try to rebalance things, we each have a role in doing that. So maybe the question could be phrased something like, given each of our gender identities, how might our roles differ or not? Maybe that would be one way I would phrase the question. Michelle got it. Okay, thanks, Tatsi.
Great. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, I'm happy to jump in and just say that there are so many ways, particularly that we've been taught to believe within constructs relative to what the feminine is. And when we start, it's simple things, all things can be connected. So from a historical perspective, at least in the United States, the origins of racism and the origins of possession, a relative oppression of women, actually came from some of the same laws that were enacted in early colonization. In the early part of the 1700s, colonial settlers that were bringing over slaves from both from England and different parts of Europe created laws, and those laws basically enacted racism and oppressed women at the same time. And so when we've been raised sort of believing things about marriage, about what's feminine, about motherhood, about how to raise, when I think it was Kathleen was saying, like, the shift relative to parenting, the shift relative to gender conversations. If we've been raised in a culture that only identifies in binary terms, male and female, these are all constructs in the mind that are supporting a paradigm that actually suppresses the feminine, suppresses all genders from being who they are. And the true returning that that I think all souls are calling for on some level is to simply be who we are. And so, one, we can begin to deconstruct these ideas by learning, by educating ourselves. Cisgendered women in particular, I think, have, there's religious conditioning, there's social conditioning, there's, and we have a particular path of healing that is called upon us to both liberate ourselves from ideas that have been put on ourselves, that have been put on about others. And like, for example, in parenting children who are now in a place where they have the freedom to identify as a different gender, or are asking questions. My son was asking questions the other day about a non-binary friend who was wanting to use new pronouns. And so just the navigation of that for me around social constructs of, like, we don't talk about this in front of other people, to bringing it forward in a way that like engages, oh wow, this is a new learning for me, this is a stretch for me. I'm constantly humbled by what I don't know about the feminine, what I don't know about gender, what I don't know even about myself. Because even to be identified as a cisgendered woman doesn't encompass actually who I really am. But I might otherwise appear to be just that, right? And so I think a lot of the learning how to heal relative to labels. And I remember the one time that I realized, like, oh, the color blue is blue because somebody made that up. It was a revolutionary thought and completely disruptive to everything that I knew, because up until that point in my life, this was in my early teens, but it was like up until that point, nobody had told me that it was okay to question what I had been taught about life. And that's a huge healing, to continuously question reality, my experience, what I know about the feminine, what I know about gender, what I know about all beings on this planet who are all healing from some sort of oppression of the true self. That's really what I can see.
Yeah, I love that.
Michelle.
Oh, sorry. Abigail.
Okay. Michelle, I just love everything that you just said, especially the part, just be who you are. I see the labels as the way we choose to express ourselves, but I want you to be very comfortable in that, in knowing who you are, and step forward as that. When you step forward, you're like, well, maybe I am this, or maybe I am that. What that creates is even more confusion, right? So I'm really getting this picture, this sense, like, okay, if this is who you are, be very comfortable in it. And then show up completely as that, because that's how people will receive you. That's how people will learn from that perspective. Like, okay, this is who you are. Oh my gosh, I had no idea. How do I learn more? I want to know more, right? But the moment there's that shakiness with it, it creates more shakiness. So that part there was gold. Just be who you are. Show up as who you are, unapologetically. And others will see that too, that courage and the confidence in how you show up. And that's going to create more of that in our world, right? It all begins with you. And someone just shared that quote, which is, again, it begins with us. Who am I? The labels truly, like Michelle said, it does not do us justice. It's just a part of us that we just, we choose and we say, okay, right now, this is what I want to show up as. But there's so much more to you, so much more to you. Show up as really who you are. Be confident, unapologetic, and the world will receive you. I wanted to add that part.
I just want to throw in, yeah, thank you for pointing out this quote, Abigail. And thank you, Kate, for putting it. You're saying that in the talk by Nia Filer, Nia said, we need to bypass the outer shell and look into the heart of the person. And I just want to highlight Nia, because I was so happy when she agreed to be part of this symposium. She is a transgender woman who is an astrologer in Israel, and everyone needs to watch that talk too. Can I say that? I'm going to say that 42 times, but oh my God. So beautiful. She's so beautiful. And her talk is a new paradigm of gender. And yeah, everybody watch that one. Yeah, wonderful. And Verena, were you going to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to add something to Michelle and to Abigail too. So I really resonate with what both of you said, but I think that it is very important that we not only show up as we are, but that we allow ourselves to change. So that who we are is not a state that is constant. We are constantly evolving. So I think it is really maybe for all of us important that we have in our head or in our mind or in our heart that when we choose a certain label, when we feel comfortable with a certain label, that we don't, and I think that's a Saturnian lesson, that we don't get stuck in this structure and in this label, but that we allow ourselves to find new ways of self-expression, because we constantly evolve and grow and learn and change. And maybe that means that our relationship to gender, to our own body, to our own identity may change too. And I think that it is very often that we maybe get stuck in a certain image and in a certain gender identity because we fear what comes when we let go of this gender identification or self-image or personality or ego structure that we have built around ourselves. And I think that, and that adds something to what Michelle said. I'm totally with you, Michelle, with all these deconditioning, and really I had to think about that we are on the threshold to the Aquarian age, and within the Aquarius archetype, there's so much, it's so much about observation. So a healthy detachment from our conditionings and the observation of our own behavior, our own thoughts, how, yeah, and I mean, Pluto has a quick dip into Aquarius next year already. And I think what maybe to answer the question, what can we do? I think we all can observe where we repress, where we live not in alignment with our true nature, with who we are now in the moment, that can change, but where we live because of our subconscious conditionings, imprints, rules that we internalized maybe from past lives, from our upbringing, from society. And since thousands of years already, we lived and incarnated in systems that were out of balance. So we can maybe we grew up with a really open-minded, within an open-minded family, but maybe we bring conditionings with us that are, and speaking I identify, I actually not know, and after this summit, if I can say after the symposium that I identify as a cisgender woman, maybe something will change. No, but I know that from the place to see myself as a woman, that I have repressed feminine energies so much because I had the feeling that I have to survive within a world that constantly pushes us forward and in linear motion. So yeah.
Yeah.
I would just add too that as a cisgender woman, like that's what the question is about, is like, just get out of the way, stop shaming, don't judge, right? Like what Michelle was saying, it's like, let people be who they are and support them for that and their journey, period, right? Like that's what we should all be doing just across the board. And, if we talk about we want to move beyond polarity, well, then we need to actually start acting from that place, right? And whether it's someone that I really don't agree with politically to, how they identify, right? All these things are on a similar continuum. So, the golden rule, treat people how you want to be treated. I think that is like the most important thing that we could do to support this.
And I just want to say, on a personal note, sort of going back to what Verena was saying, yeah, I know in my own life, if I look back on myself as a 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old, if the label gender fluid had existed then, I would have identified absolutely in that way for sure. Because when I had a shaved head and I wanted to be a lesbian separatist until I realized I wasn't lesbian. I mean, attracted to, I would now call myself pansexual, right? But anyway, so, and at this point I would say I identify as cisgender female, but not totally, like she, they, I guess. But for sure, I mean, I've gone through waves, like, and I have my Venus and Aries, right? So I can take on more of like I can take on a lot of variety of how I experience the feminine and the masculine and all of it. Yeah, so anyway, just want to throw in that personal note. I want to make sure we hear from Erik on this question, because you are the one person who identifies as male who agreed to be on this panel despite me asking other people. So you get to carry this little spotlight, but I apologize and thank you.
What question is that?
The question being, what do you feel like, given your gender identity, given each of our gender identities, but specifically speaking to you, what do you feel like is your role in promoting gender balancing in this time?
By example, mostly, and through the work that I do in my own exploration of what is the masculine and feminine. What does that mean? Who am I as a quote man, or what is my relationship to the feminine, and all the variables, all the different expressions that are contained outside of that and within that in a wide variety of ways. So this would be for me to continue to explore that. To me, it's a never-ending journey. It does not end. It continues to unfold, and I continue to have great reverence for the journey, a great appreciation, honoring of that space, because my own exploration of the masculine and feminine myself has had a lot of ups and downs, and coming to this space where I'm in much greater peace with my own journey through wholeness, and bringing that all together for myself and the identity that I have for myself. But I do feel like that's going to evolve too, just in general, as we have new experiences and new insights, and things pass on and other things come in. We open up into whole new territory, and that's exciting. This is just, we're in a really crunch time of the intersection of one great age into another, and there's a lot of chaos swirling around, but that's a fertile ground for a full exploration and deep dive into everything that we are. And this is a great time to just dive into the space, like who are we as human beings? What does that really mean? And the most fundamental question of the search for meaning, beyond even just the pure primal survival. And Jung really outlined that is what does it mean to be? What does it mean to be us as individuals, as a collective, as humanity? So that's how I would respond to that question there.
Great. Can I add, I'm going to add another question for you. And then I want to make sure we hear from Kathleen and Vanessa. And then I think I'll start to close up, if that's all right. So for you, Erik, I mean, you do a lot of work regarding the masculine. Your talk was about the masculine, but you also wrote a book on Vesta. And so I don't know if you would want to say something about what motivated you to do that, coming from the gender identity that you have. I mean, I can guess what your answer would be, but it might be helpful for people to hear.
Yeah, thank you. To put it in a really, really short summary, after doing research with clients, I noticed Vesta having this rhythm about it every 29 years with Saturn and its relationship to Saturn. And I don't have Virgo in my chart. And so I became even more curious about Vesta in a way that I've never done before. And it wasn't originally taught to me through Daniel G. Mario's school. So I went full into understanding what it meant and discovering another layer of the divine feminine in myself and in others out there, and a really powerful resonance with that particular goddess archetype, Vesta Hestia, and the goddess, the guardians and the protectors of the temple, the caretakers of the temple. And it was just immensely moving, and I continue to explore that for myself. And I sharing through all that research that I want to make an expanded volume that's more of like a summary of my research. There's much more there. So for me, Vesta has played such a critical role in my understanding of myself, of who I am, my identity. I was born with Vesta in Aquarius, conjunct my North Node. And it has played such a pivotal role in where my journey is going. And I continue to revere it for not just the asteroid, but the archetypal energy that's within me and how it connects to others around the world. Just fully going into the space and just being in that and knowing that that's part of my identity and part of my journey.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
So Kathleen and Vanessa, I feel like we haven't heard from you in a little while. Do you have anything pressing you want to say?
Sure. So yeah, I like the question, the way it was asked, like, what is women's role, specifically people who identify as women, or whether cisgender or trans, in the rising of the divine feminine. And as I was thinking about my perspective on that, because I do work a lot with women, with female identified people in my women's circles, and what came up for me, though, I actually think might apply to all genders, which is to honor as sacred the feminine elements within yourself, right? So the parts of yourself that feel feminine, or that society has labeled as feminine, or that resonate with the divine feminine, as we've been talking about, right? To really revere and honor and cherish those aspects of you as sacred. And why do I say that? Because like, I think Verena, I think you mentioned, like, within a patriarchal society, within patriarchal religions for centuries, we've been operating in this sort of unbalanced masculine mode in order to survive. And perhaps especially those who identify as female, right? Or who feel a resonance with that. We've had to push a lot of that to the side and sort of show up in our masculine business suits to, like, to get along in the world and to make things happen and to survive, right? And like, I particularly, and many of us, they have come from religions where, like, God was spoken of only exclusively in masculine terms, right? And so I think a lot of the reclaiming there for us, no matter what our genders, is to say, I resonate with this aspect of the feminine, whether it's Mother Earth or my own intuition, right? Like getting in touch with my body's felt knowledge rather than being all up in my head at the time, right? Or that sort of dark, fertile, creative potential, like whatever are these aspects of the sacred feminine that you resonate with, no matter what your gender. To me, it's a lot about reclaiming that is divine, that is sacred, and that we need those parts of ourselves, and that those are actually the parts of ourselves that we all need to reclaim. And what the other thing that comes up for me around that is like, for me, the helpful thing in that process has been using divine feminine names and images for the sacred, for spirit, right? Or for Mother Earth. So my invitation, that was what was absolutely crucial in my journey. When I realized that you could call God she, I was like, what? You can do that? Because then all of a sudden she can be within me, right? As someone who identifies as a she, right? But guess what? She's in all of us, because we all have that feminine aspect of ourselves, right? So that's kind of my invitation and my game that I like to play and I throw out to everyone is like, well, what happens if if you talked about the goddess, even using that word, right? What is your reactions to that word? Like, what comes up when we talk about, God the mother, or the goddess, or Venus, or Bridget, or Vesta, or Aphrodite, like identifying with the spirit or the sacred in a way that's feminine, just seeing what happens and how that invites us to greater integration and to greater healing. So
Thank you.
Well, I just want to add that I really feel like everybody gave such deep, thorough answers to this question, and I really resonate with them all. And I think my answer might sound a little simple in comparison, but for me as a cisgender woman, I'm feeling like, and also as somebody who grew up in a very rigid religion where things were duality, you're either one thing or another. I have felt like for me and a lot of the women that I work with, being aware of where your resistance is, being aware of what you're resisting in regard to gender fluidity, and coming back to what we spoke about with the divine feminine being flowing, being fluid. And when you can identify where you are resisting, then you can decide to allow instead. And you can decide to open to possibilities, to new understandings, and to embody that flowing, nurturing, accepting nature. And I think that simple act can go a long way in connecting with things that we don't maybe understand fully. And the more we can connect, I think the more that we can come together as one and re-become the one.
Mhm. Wonderful. Before I start to wrap up, was there any like burning thing that any of you feel like you have to say before we go?
I
Michelle?
just wanted to acknowledge there's a question on the Q&A
Yeah.
that says, how can we not judge those who are not open to gender fluidity and this enlightened gender expression if one believes that homosexuality or transsexuality is wrong? The openness that is being discussed needs to find a way to envelop that as well, but it's not clear how that's done. And I mean, the one thing that I don't think we've presenced here yet so far, but but encompasses all of this, which is that an element of the divine feminine or an element of the divine mother, including also in this element of the divine masculine, is unconditional love and forgiveness, and a part of my own personal spiritual path has been the Course in Miracles, which is an unfolding journey of learning how to change the mind to a forgiving mind, to our true nature, which is to be love. And that's something that's like so oversimplified. It's like, just be love. Well, if there is, resentment and anger and hurt and judgment and fear in the mind, we have to, as a personal part of our soul work, do the work to forgive, do the work to actually notice that, to be with those reactions, and to reach for that quality of the divine feminine, which is unconditionally loving, all accepting. Nature accepts all. There isn't any part of nature that rejects anything. If we were in a culture where we were in right relationship, going back to what was said at the very beginning around right relationship to the earth, we would recognize that fruit trees produce fruit for everyone. It doesn't discriminate. Water nourishes everybody on this planet, regardless. That's unconditional love, demonstrated. Oxygen is breathed by everyone. So we're not going to be at that level of consciousness, but a part of our work is really to walk ourselves and each other home. And that may also mean cultivating forgiveness towards people who are rejecting, oppressing, still causing harm to those who are most vulnerable. One of the other questions on the panel was from a mother of a transgender daughter. And really that's a soul assignment to then protect and care for that being, for their knowing themselves as their true self, for their creating safety for them. And then part of that is going to be forgiving people who don't bring those attitudes of safety, who still perpetuate harm in our culture, and not allowing that to close our hearts. That's also an element of the feminine. So I just wanted to presence that last Q&A before we close. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and obviously this is a tip of an iceberg that could go on for, and will go on. It does go on. It'll go on for the rest of our lives. And I'll just say that everyone on this panel is absolutely available as a resource for anybody who, needs and wants to go more deeply into these topics. Many of us are offering things in the future, some of us together, some of us separately in various forms. And we're here, and there's lots of resources out there in addition to us. But continue to send us questions. I love getting emails from people, getting questions from people. I would love to keep connecting people with, I was a social worker for most of 20 years. So that's part of who I am, is wanting to connect people with each other. Yeah, and just to close, can we just go back into silence for a second and each go around the circle and say one or two words, whatever it comes to you that you want to say to close this time together. I'm going to go around the circle and call your name and just say the one or two words that come through. So Kathleen.
Love and gratitude.
Sheridan.
Trust and allow.
Abigail.
Gratitude and flow.
Michelle.
Healing with the mother.
Erik.
I am in awe and I'm just so grateful.
Vanessa.
Cycles of nature.
Verena.
Deep honor of the feminine, the masculine, and everything that is in between that, and around that.
Beautiful. And I'm seeing Alyssa says peace. Thank you for that, Alyssa. And I say, incredible deep love, gratitude. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you, Martha.
Thank you. Sign into
Thank you.
sign into the next link if you want to join for the Divine Masculine. We'll see you in 14 minutes.
Thank you, Martha.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much,
Martha.
Martha.
Thank you.
You.
Bye.